Good morning, everybody who's participating this morning. My name is Mboneni Muraudzi from the South African Cultural Observatory, a project of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, which is run by or being implemented by Nelson Mandela University, Rhodes University, Forte, and University of KZN. With this morning, we're co-hosting the workshop together with Future Festivals South Africa. And Professor Snowball will do just an introduction of several speakers this morning. But just to say, as one of the initiatives that we actually are mandated to do is to work with various stakeholders in the cultural and creative space. And we're very grateful this morning that Future Festival South Africa involved us in co-hosting this workshop. And we're looking forward to hearing very exciting things from the various speakers. Professor Snowball, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mboneni. Firstly, welcome to everybody who's joining us today from all over the country and also from all over the world. It's lovely to have you as part of our project. And thank you also to the Cultural Observatory for co-hosting with us. Today's agenda, I'll just tell you a little bit sort of very briefly about it. We wanted to start off by talking a little bit about the Future Festivals South Africa research project, after which we'll hand over to our festival partners who are going to be telling you about their exciting adaptation journey through the rocky waters of COVID-19. We originally invited 3 partners to join us. That is Said Oosterfees from Cape Town, and I'm very happy to say that Jana Hutting is with us, and she will be talking on behalf of them, who did a drive-in festival, which has got a very special place in the hearts of many South Africans. We've also invited Jay Dowes from Cape Town Carnival to come and talk about what happened to the carnival and what the plans are for the future. And then we had also invited Osa Mazwai from Buyel Ekaya. He unfortunately will not be able to join us, but he has sent some comments and suggestions that we can share with you at the end if there is time. If you think of any questions for the research team or for the festivals as we are progressing, please feel free to put them in the chat. I see it's already a nice busy chat with people acknowledging each other and saying hello. That's wonderful. And we'll pick them up at the end of the session and try to answer as many of those as we possibly can. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to hand over to the principal investigator of Future Festivals South Africa, Dr. Roberta Communion, who is joining us from King's College in London. And this is a multinational, multidisciplinary research team, which is funded actually through the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council. So Roberta, if you'd like to take over and just say a little bit about our project, and then we'll hand over to each member of the team just to talk about how they're doing their research, and then we'll move on to the festivals after that.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks, everybody, for joining us in this discussion this morning. So I'm going to introduce you a little bit to our project, which is called Future Festival South Africa. As you can see, there are 2 universities involved, King's College London and Rhodes University. And obviously, we have the support of the South African Cultural Observatory, which is amazing. Thanks for hosting this event today. And we're funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. So the project, this is a photo line of what we're going to be talking about this morning. I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to the project, which is a 12-month project. We started in November, so we're kind of almost halfway. So it's just good to catch up and share a few of the things that we've done. And obviously having your feedback and your input is very valuable. So as Jen said, please use the chat and we'll try and respond to the questions at the end of the seminar. But also, obviously, if you have anything else comes up into your mind a little bit later on, you can also go on the website and find our contact form, our contact details. So get in touch whenever you feel there's something you want to share or discuss further with us. I'm going to introduce you our research team and give you a little overview of what we're doing with the project. And then each of the team members will give you a little insight on some early findings, some data that we have been collecting. So hopefully this is just a way to introduce you to some of these ideas and the work we've done, and we really welcome your feedback. So to give you a little bit of a view on the project, so we started in November and we got 12 months altogether. The aim is really to investigate South African Arts Festival and how they have sort of reacted to COVID-19. And here is very much trying to share what is the knowledge that is being developed and the new thinking behind it. So we obviously know that COVID-19 has been a very challenging time for festival, for performing arts in general, and artists all over the world. Here we want to obviously acknowledge that and make that evident, if that's useful obviously for festival and for policy, you know, to understand the real impact of COVID-19. But we also want to think about what has changed, what's happened, what's been the reaction, what's been the new ideas, the innovation, the ways in which festivals have tried to navigate these issues. The project is very much based on mixed methods, and you will see that in a minute when our researchers talk. We are using case studies, we are doing quantitative audience data research, but we're also looking at mapping where the festival have happened and what has happened to those festivals. But we're also having in-depth discussion and qualitative interviews with some of the festival as our case study, because we really want to reflect on their thinking, on their reaction, on the way they put together new initiatives. And finally, something that we're just about to start, we are going to do some featuring activities, and Jonathan will talk about that in a minute with you. So really thinking about what's going to happen to festivals and what kind of future everybody sees for festivals after COVID-19. And as I said, we are really interested in hearing of new business models, new approaches, new ways in which festivals have reinvented themselves. And this is the project website, and feel free to go there. There are some blog posts, so there's more content that you can read there about the project, but also feel free to get in touch if there is any further input that you would like to give us. This is our team. So obviously you just met me. I'm Roberta Comunian from King's College. You met also Professor Jen Snowball from Rhodes University. And these are three other researchers involved in the project. Dr. Jonathan Gross, King's College London, which will be talking about the future activities. Dylan Tendall, based at Rhodes University, who will be talking about the quantitative data analysis on audiences of festivals. And Fiona Drummond, which has done a really lovely job of mapping, you know, what's happened to festival in South Africa between 2019 and 2020. And this is a brief overview of the project and the way we are thinking about the project overall. So there has been, in the past 6 months, we've done a lot of data collection, and the data collection has happened through case studies. So obviously we had to focus on a few of the festivals, but we've tried to see, to think about different kind of festival and different approaches that they have used in response to COVID-19. For each of the festival, we are trying to put together some quantitative audience data to understand the impact on the audience side, but also hosting a lot of qualitative interviews and focus group to discuss with the producers, with the managers, what was the thinking behind the changes, how they reacted to COVID-19, and how these new approaches that they have adopted a bit, you know, efficient and efficacy in sort of getting engaged, engaging audiences and rethinking about their content. And finally, as I said, we're also thinking about featuring activities involving both the producers and their audiences about about what is the future of festival and how festival will respond to these changes. And as we do this data collection for each festival, we're also reflecting back on what knowledge is being created, what reflections are emerging. So this event is in many ways part of the project because it's really useful for us to tell you a little bit what's happened and what data we collected, what is the thinking of festival in South Africa at the moment, because hopefully that knowledge can help shape again the future developments. So it's very reflexive in that way. As we collect the data, we really would like to share it and make sure it's relevant and we can get feedback from the sector. And as I say, towards the end of the project, so in the last few months, we will also try to draw together some findings and some learnings. So what have we learned from the experience of these festivals all together about how the sector is reshaping and, you know, using the impact of COVID-19 to think about future developments. So I'm now going to pass the call to Fiona Drummond, who, as I said, has been doing some amazing mapping for us, and she'll talk you through some maps and some data she has collected. Fiona, over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be with you today. If we can just go to the next slide, please, Roberta. So in terms of creating the database of festivals in South Africa, we included general arts and cultural festivals, so something like the National Arts Festival, where they have a variety of events. We also included comedy festivals, film festivals, literary festivals, and music festivals. So the main ones we excluded were culinary festivals for South Africa. In terms of collecting the data, Dylan Tarantal, who'll be talking to you shortly, created a web scraping tool for us to have a preliminary look at festivals in South Africa. We also did just general online searches per province and festival category. So that could be something like film festivals in South Africa or music festivals in the Western Cape or Cape Town. Tourism websites were also very useful. So there were a number of articles that were giving advice to people on the best festivals to go to in South Africa. And then quite a few of the festivals don't have official websites. So social media was actually really great in helping to track down festivals. And Facebook recommendations for once came in useful, and they recommended some other festivals to look at. So if we have a look at the table, you'll see that in 2019, we tracked down 214 festivals across South Africa. And then in 2020, there were 115 festivals that occurred. So you'll see that the Western Cape and Gauteng host the most festivals in South Africa, followed by the KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. And then the other provinces host a number of festivals. In general, if we look between 2019 and 2020, approximately half of the festivals that occurred in 2019 took place in 2020. Can we go to the next slide, please? So if we look at the types of festivals and their response to COVID, you'll see that comedy festivals, they were mainly fine. They managed to go online. So all of the festivals that occurred in 2019 also happened in 2020. Film had a really great response as well. They managed to go virtual, and literary festivals were generally okay. Arts and culture and music were the hardest hit in South Africa, with approximately half of the number of festivals managing to go ahead in 2020. So the next slide here, you'll see the comparison of South African festivals held in 2019 and 2020. So this is done using proportional circles. So the larger the circle, the larger the number of festivals. And here you can see the spread across the provinces. And there it becomes quite clear that the Western Cape and Gauteng host the most festivals. And then you'll see also in 2020 that the Northwest Province and Mpumalanga were not able to host any festivals due to COVID. Then if we look at the proportions of the types of festivals, you'll see there's a dominance of blue and green, blue being the arts and cultural festivals and green being the music. So those are the most common festivals that we have in South Africa. If we move on to the next slide, then you'll see how South African festivals have responded to COVID. So if you have a look at the red, you'll see that it dominates across all the provinces, and that represents the cancellation of festivals. So you can see that festivals in South Africa were really hard hit by the pandemic. If you look in the blue, these are the festivals that happened before lockdown. So 28 festivals were able to happen before the lockdown hit in March. If you have a look at the purple, that is the virtual festivals, and you'll see that's the most popular response that South African festivals had to COVID-19. In green, you'll see hybrid festivals. So 7 festivals managed to do a hybrid event, which is partly online, partly live. And then 17 festivals in the yellow there managed to have a COVID-19 compliant event, and we'll be hearing from some of those festivals who had those responses. And so that's it for me, and I'll pass on to Dylan Tarantal.
Yes, next is Dylan Tarantal talking about what we've been learning about audiences of these festivals.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Roberta. Thank you, Fiona. As you heard, I'm Dylan Tarantal. I'll be taking you guys through the online audiences, what we've learned over the course of our research. So for this particular aspect of the research, I'm just going to be focusing on how you can use Google Analytics to establish what your online audience is. So the reason why we're using Google Analytics now is because since the transition of festivals from the live setup to an online medium means that you now have access to additional data that is generated from the website. So the difference between the two is that there are benefits to Google Analytics. There are also benefits to conducting your normal research. So in terms of your live events, you would have audience surveys or interviews. And then these are usually exercised after the conclusion of your festival. With Google Analytics, you can get real-time data whilst the festival is still running, and then that'll allow you to make certain adjustments to the platform that you're using. So in terms of Google Analytics, there are 3 main aspects. The first one is the audience, second one is acquisition, and then the third one is the audience behavior. So in terms of the first section, which is audience, it merely looks at the characteristics of your audience. So depending on what type of membership you're using for your Google Analytics, you'll usually get information about location, which I pass over to Fiona to make her beautiful maps. You have your languages and then also technology used. For the premium versions, you can get information on age, gender, engagement, and loyalty towards the website compared to other festivals. In terms of the acquisition section, that gives you information on how people actually landed on your site. So did they come via organic search? Did they use social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and so forth? And then the final section is the behavior. So how the users then interact with your website. So how they get from the landing page to their content, or if they merely get to your page and then instantly exit it, that's known as your bounce rate, which is usually the metric that you use to then determine whether or not the audience are enjoying your content or not. You can go to the next slide, Roberta. So for our Google Analytics, for our attempt at deriving audience perception via Google Analytics, we were fortunate enough to receive access to the Google Analytics of the Virtual National Arts Festival this year. So the results that I'll be sharing here are limited to the results that I've already shared with the organizers. There is way more results that you can obtain from Google Analytics, but this will only be available in our report. So for instance, what I wanted to do with the viewership data was to determine whether or not people tended to view the content when they had more free time or not. So the comparison between weekday viewership and then weekend viewership. So from the graphic on the left, you can see that there's actually no difference in terms of the viewership. You have slight increases and decreases. So on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, you have your high viewerships, and then on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, you have lower viewerships. But then if we check the graphic on the right, we then look at the hourly viewership of the audience members for the content on the site. And then as you can see, there tends to be a peak in viewership between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. on a daily basis. So for instance, with the virtual NAF this year, they tended to use pre-recorded content. So they didn't use any live streaming. So if they wanted to switch it up this year and do live streaming, as they will be doing, they would need to then choose the primetime slots. So in this case, that would be between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. So on the next slide, Roberta. So then I wanted to check if the viewership remained constant for each of these days according to the various time slots. And as you can see on the graphic on the left, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday more or less follow the same pattern. So they tend to peak around about the 6 to 8 o'clock slot and then dip afterwards. Whereas on Tuesday, you tend to experience a dip during this time period. So we are not quite sure at the moment what people are interested in at that time slot, but currently it's conflicting with the content that is available on the virtual NAF site. So then if they wanted to then live stream according to the metrics here, they would have to push those live streams a little bit later. So between or after 9 o'clock to about 11 o'clock. The other nice thing you can do with Google Analytics, as I'll explain with the graphic on the right, is that you can determine if you are experiencing subpar viewership during the course of your festival. So as we can see, with regards to the VNAF daily viewership, the viewership in early July is much greater than the viewership in late June. Now, with inspection of the data on Google Analytics, we found that there were higher bounce rates in later June compared to early July. There were also larger page loading times between the different segments, and then people also had shorter sessions on average. So this technically means that there was either a change that happened on the website. And after speaking to the CEO of NAF, Monica Newton, we found out that actually at the beginning of July, they found out that they had an issue based on quality versus performance. Now, the quality issue was that they uploaded the content at a higher quality than what people could render with their technological system. So that could be the device that they are using or the internet connectivity that they had. So then based on the insights from Google Analytics, they were then able to make this change and then be able to escalate their viewership. The alternative that you can do is something that the Twitch platform and YouTube platform uses, is what is known as the re-encoding of video. So you lower your bitrate to then meet the demands of your various audience members. Onto the next slide, Roberta, thanks. So then, depending on the type of festival you're running, your audience language preference will differ from the virtual NAF. So the virtual NAF was dominated by your English viewers. They had 98% English viewers and then 2% other. And then on the right side of this graphic, we then break down this 2%, finding that 54% of the 2%, so around 1% overall, was French viewers. And this is going to be very important for the next slide. Don't switch it, Roberta, sorry. So looking at the English audience language preference and then using cross-sectional data to then determine the influences of the language on the interaction of the website, we found that the two groups, so English and your French audience, were actually the two groups that spent the most on the site, even at the per user level. But again, the 2% is not sufficient enough for the organizers to overhaul the entire website and provide it in alternative languages. The alternative to this is that people can opt to use Google Translate on their browsers. And then in terms of the content, the organizers can then maybe add subtitles to their videos, which will not only help with the providing content for the multi-language audience, but also help out with the hearing impaired audience so that they can actually also understand what is happening in the content. Okay, then on to the last slide, Roberta, thanks. So So then the final graphic indicates the bounce rates according to your language group. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the percentage of users who close a page on the site after immediately accessing it. So they open up a page and then without interacting with any of the links or buttons on the site, they immediately close the site. So depending on the type of website you have, this is generally considered a bad thing. So to have a high bounce rate is considered a bad thing. So if you have like a one-page vlog, you would expect a high bounce rate because there's nothing to interact with. So once we analyze the bounce rates according to the language groups, we found that the English and the French, who spent the most on the site and interacted the most with the site as well, had the lowest bounce rate. So they were around the 44% mark and the 40 mark. Whereas all the other groups, especially the Persian language group, experience higher bounce rates. So this could mean, so I'm not saying that it is, but it could mean that the website might currently be too complex for someone who is not a first language English speaker to traverse. But however, we can't definitively say that because we also need to look at other factors. So these factors include the location of the host server, so that so if you are further away from the host server, you will generally have larger page load times, and then also the quality of the internet interacting with the quality of the videos. So then that will also result in larger page load times. So then both of these metrics then present inconvenience for the consumer, and therefore they might just opt out and close the page, increasing the bounce rates. So finally, what I want to say with regards to Google Analytics versus your normal audience surveys is that I suggest that you use them both, because there are certain aspects for cross-sectional data that you can only get from audience-based surveys. Whereas with Google Analytics, you can get real-time data, which you can help to improve your current website instead of having to wait for the next edition of your festival to make those improvements. So thank you, Roberta.
Thanks, Dylan. And we move to the next speaker, which is Dr. Jonathan Gross, who will talk about thinking new possibilities for new futures.
Thanks a lot, Roberta, and hello everyone from a very cold but sunny London, UK. I'm very pleased to be with you today. So a really important part of this research project is to speak to festival managers and organisers and creatives to hear about the experience of the last year, what it's been like, what kinds of things have been possible, what kinds of things have been impossible. And Jana and Jay are going to share some of their experiences in a moment. But as well as thinking about what the experience of the past year has been like, we're also really keen to look to the future, hence the name of the project, Future Festivals South Africa. So as we all know, COVID-19 has changed our expectations of how we do things. So in that sense, thinking about the future in new ways has become essential and necessary, but it's also been very difficult to carve out the space if we're just trying to survive from day to day, to get things done, to make things possible that were possible in the past. So part of what the research is doing is creating the space for thinking creatively about the future, which of course many festivals are keen to do. And we're connecting this to a field of academic research called Futures Studies, which is perhaps not as well known as it should be. And within Futures Studies, there's a really helpful distinction between 4 different kinds of future that we can think about. So we can think about possible futures, all of the different futures that could happen, and invite people to think as openly as possible in a research context. What are all of the conceivable futures for your festival? But then once we've laid out all of those possible futures, we might then think, okay, so which of them are plausible? Let's set aside the ones that are just completely impossible and narrow it down to the plausible futures. And then from the plausible futures, we might think from these, which are most probable. So we've gone from the possible to the plausible to the probable. But after all, what we're looking to develop are the futures for the festivals that we want. So what are the preferable futures? What are the kinds of festivals that people would like to see beyond the pandemic? So hopefully that gives you a set of futures to play around with, the possible, the plausible, the probable, and the preferable. And in our conversations with festivals, we're hoping to sort of open up the space of what the future could look like, moving from the possible to the preferable and thinking about what would help to get to those preferable futures. And of course, artists and art itself is a space of imagination. Artists have particular imaginative skills and capacities. So we're interested to draw on those skills and capacities in thinking about those possible and preferable futures. And we're currently working with our festival partners to design creative methods for imagining the futures of their festivals and other festivals within South Africa. So this might be, just to give you one example, to invite people to write a letter from the year 2030 saying, it's 10 years after the pandemic, things have changed, this is what our festival looks like now, and this is how we got here. So that's just one example of a creative method for imagining the future of a festival. But we're working to co-produce those creative methods with our festival partners. And then the creative outputs of those activities will constitute data that we analyze along with our interviews, our focus groups, our audience data, etc. But it's really important to emphasize that the process of imagining future festivals is not only to produce data in that way, but also to get a conversation going, to share ideas, to build up a network of festivals in South Africa who are interested in thinking what the future looks like, not only for their festival, but collectively across the ecosystem of South African festivals. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the range of research methods we're using and the kind of direction we're going in over the next few months. And without further ado, I think I'll now hand back to Roberta and then to our festival partners.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Thanks. And thank you everyone for your comments on the chat. Just to remind you, you can drop questions there, but we'll try and answer them at the end of the workshop rather than straight away. So now, Jen, I think you've introduced already the festival, but maybe it's worth having them introduce them again for people that may have joined us a little bit later. So I'll pass the ball to you, Jen.
Sure. Thank you very much to Roberta. And that was just a very kind of speedy rundown of some of the research that the Future Festivals team is doing. We do have a website with a blog where we're posting stuff and where you can sign up to get updates as well if you would like to. I also see that some festival organizers are sharing very generously in the chat their email addresses. And so part of what we're hoping to do is to make a more inclusive network of festivals operating in South Africa. So if you would like to share your email address in the chat, we're also very happy to collect those up and then to circulate the list if you would like to share networking activities in the future with other festivals. Okay, so now it's my very pleasant duty to introduce our two festival organizer speakers. You're going to give you a kind of on the ground, what it was like in the chaos of the moment. First, we have Jana Hutting, and I see that she's switched on her camera. Hello, Jana, great to see you. Thank you very much for coming. Jana is going to be talking about the Suid-Oosterfees, and I'll put those slides up in a moment. And then I would also like to introduce Jay Dawes. Jay, I see you've got your camera on. Hi, great to see you. Jay is going to be talking about the Cape Town Carnival and what happened to them in 2020 and maybe what's going to happen in the future. So without taking up more of their time, I'm going to share your beautiful slides for the Suid-Oosterfees now, Jana. So I hope those have come up. And then if you could just cue me if you want to change the slide. So over to you, Jana.
So thank you, Jen. think just a bit of background, the Zuidooster, it was a month before that we went into lockdown, and we realized that the festival's not going to take place and that we need to start rethinking what we can do. So Jane, if you can move on to the next one, please. It ended up with 4 activities. The drive-in, that was our main focus. Some music videos we produced online, a visual arts exhibition, and then our Jake Scherwel discussions and some of our rising stars. So our music videos started in the hard lockdown. With Freedom Day, we had the Libertas Choir doing a video, each one rehearsing at home with the director on video directing them what to do. And that sort of gave us an idea of how can we combine the online with the live event. It was very important for us to try and create some form of live event, and that is where the drive-in came from. And Jen, you can just quickly scan through the next 2 slides, which is just about the music video, just a short show to see what we were doing with David Kramer of Check Corona, and we did some stuff for Women's Day, sorry about that. After the videos, as I said, we had a small visual art exhibition, which was basically the first live event we hosted, and that is where we realized we are now COVID officers, and a lot of time it took to have all the protocols in place to keep your audiences safe. And then after the art exhibition, it was our joyful story of the drive-in theatre. So how it worked, because we wanted to have the live component, we had a stage put on and the big screen. And I must say this project we are very, very grateful for Atlantic Studios, who helped us with the setup, because you need cameras, you need the big screen. You're basically combining the budget of a film with a live event, because you have to have screens, cameras, camera operators, but also sound and technical, which was quite interesting. With Francois van Cooke, the sound mixer was sitting in his car mixing the sound for the stage. Yeah, just an interesting fact. Jen, if you can move on to the next slide. Just in terms of what we wanted, or aims for this project, was to have some kind of a physical gathering with international regulations, the performance to be live, to provide a platform for young and established artists together, to create jobs for artists, technically suppliers, and to have quality products or productions that is accessible and affordable to all. So that was what we wanted to achieve with this project. Jane, you can move on to the next. And then, as you know, the biggest was the safety measures and not to be a super spread event. So we had the masks, we did the sanitizing, we did screening beforehand. A lot of time and energy went into keeping the audiences safe, because that was also the artists, that was our main priority. Then, Jen, we can show them the next. It's just a few slides to show you how it looked like. This was the productions we held. So we had a bit of a combination. We did Francois van Cooke and LEB. We had a bigger focus on music, because theatre is not so easy to do on a big screen. It was more a music focus, but with the Klopse, it's a project of Lukman Adams, where he had an online project called The Shock with Klopse and Malay choirs, and we took the winners and we combined them with the established artists. Lach My Klo was also a virtual competition we did, where we got young comedians to write in, and then we combined them with more established ones. BJ Powers was in concert with the Tigerbit Children's Choir. Jen, you can move on to the next. And then you'll see people came early with their masks, having a little picnic in the parking lot. Jen, you can, it's just another one of people arriving early. The next slide, you will see just Jib, Francois van Cooke, so that we can have the projection on the big screen. Mark Lottering, the comedy we did inside because you need a bit of laugh. So we put 50 people indoor with him and then projected it out so that he doesn't have to play to 100 cars. The nice thing was actually with the music and even with the comedy that the cars would start hooting and flashing lights when it was the audience response, which was quite spectacular to see. Then you can move on to the next for us. It's just how it looked when people start arriving. The next slide is PJ Powers of the choir on stage. You'll see the big screen there. Next up, it's just a part of the Klopse Joel we did. And then Emo Lukman as part of that production. Next slide would be, again, people sitting outside their cars with their mask, looking at the production. Next slide would be, again, just to get the feel, the cars with the people on stage and the screen there. We also had a bit of discussions. We're quite big on our book program, and we did that for audience of 50, as you can see, with the social distancing, but we recorded it so that it could be available online and have a bigger reach. You can move on to the next, Jane. One of our flagships is our Nazi Rising Stars, where we took young writers and mentor them in Somerset East for 3 weeks, and then we bring them back and take them into a production mentorship. And these productions we also performed inside the studio for 50 audience members so that they had the chance to showcase. You can just move on for us, Jen. So it's just once again some photos of these productions. You can move to the next. And then we did a project online, which was Lockdown Legato, where we combined different artists and different genres. These shows will hopefully very soon be a live event in the planetarium's well. So everyone who's in Cape Town, we will apply with all the safety measures. Please come and have a look at that. You can switch over to the next one. Thank you, Jane. It's just once again some of the recordings we did for Lockdown Legato. Next slide would be, this year we did a small festival at Artscape with all the regulations. This is just to show where the people went in, the safety measures we had in place there. And then once again, if you move to the next slide, we tried to keep a type of festival feel outside, and we use students from our partners like Dance for All and the Stage Performing Arts Academy to raise funds for the Tribute Fund, and just to have a bit of a festival vibe so that you don't get strangled up with all the regulations and protocols. You can go on, Jen. So there we have just once again some of the younger kids, students performing outside to raise the money for Tribute. Next slide, please, Jane. Just the outside still, and then just some production pics of what we put on the stage with limited audiences according to national regulations. And that is the St. Worcester story for the last year.
Gosh, thank you so much, Yana. I'm just going slowly through your beautiful pictures, but I think I've got to the end now. That's wonderful. Let me just switch on my camera. So thank you very much for sharing with us your journey and plans for the future and what actually happened this year already, because your festival has actually taken place. So there are quite a few questions in the chat. That's wonderful. Thank you very much for putting those there. With your permission, we'll come back to them at the end. So what I'd like to do now is to hand over to Jay, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Cape Town Carnival and their adaptation and plans for the future. But please, we're not ignoring your questions. I'm making notes, and I promise we'll come back to the end. At the end, we'll come back to them and have a discussion. So as you think of them, please put them in. Jay, over to you.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everybody. Can you see my presentation? Okay, cool. So the Cape Town Carnival Incredible Journey was actually the name of our theme for 2020. So we had no idea just how incredible this journey would be. As happened to everybody else in March, we were reeling from the cancellation due to hard lockdown. Our event was due to go ahead in 6 days. So, you know, we had built all our floats, rehearsed all our performances. We were loading in equipment on the Monday morning after our president declared a ban on events. So it really was a horrifying cancellation. And everything moved super quickly. We had to, our building was closed down immediately, and we were all thrown into working from home. And we really didn't actually know anything about digital. We were very non-digital savvy. So we spent the first period just getting everybody up and running on you know, digital tools like Zoom. And there was actually quite a lot of emotional stress, which we had to work with in the beginning. And we were very clear we were in uncharted territory, that nobody around the world and nobody in the event sector actually had any ideas. So we drew together all the levels of our staff, and we actually worked on our strategy for the year together straight away in March. And we got into scenario planning, and we started following other organizations that were moving into the online showcasing. And we'd really like to laud them for going into that space, and for some right at the beginning, you know, having quite difficult situations that didn't go that well. So we were able to learn from them. And we watched and learned. We were very careful not to try and imitate, but to see what was working and not working, and what would work for Carnival, which is very much an experience. It's not so much something you watch as you participate in. And as an NGO, it was extremely tempting, and there was quite a lot of pressure on us, you know, to support our communities through feeding schemes or, you know, other endeavors. And so we really had to remain true to what it is that we do, and that is to inspire joy and unity through creativity. So our purpose became very, very central. We really had to be clear about what that was and stick with it. And our organizational culture was also very, very important in keeping us focused and supporting each other during the crisis. Once our team was inspired and motivated and energized, which actually happened quite quickly because we pulled together, then we were able to look outwards towards our community. Now, our carnival is made up of the participants that come from 40 different neighborhoods in the broader metropole, and actually some groups from other provinces. So we had to be quite focused and energized in order to work with them and keep them energized, and to deal with you know, real losses of jobs and health scares and all of that sort of thing. And then, of course, working outward from that, we had to realign and find the common purpose with our sponsors and our stakeholders, because we weren't able to do a live event. So what was behind the work we were doing that they could then still continue to fund us for? And that's where we really started working actively outside of a live, you know, 50,000 spectator interactive carnival event. We had to look at very different activities. So these are the sort of areas of our work activity, spending a lot of time rewriting or redesigning event formats and presenting them to safety and security at the city, getting it turned down, trying something else. They're going, no, we're not interested in the drive-in, you know, everybody's doing that. And but some of the stuff that underlies the Cape Town Carnival is the work in bringing different groups from different languages, different cultural backgrounds together. We could deepen and strengthen that work. Job creation is always a big part of what we do, but we could focus on that, training, skills development, and finding new ways to give our participating communities exposure. With the event format, we had to turn it on its head. Instead of the performers moving through the city, we have looked at the audience moving through the performances, which would be separated and COVID safe. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. So we had to rethink the interaction between audience and performers. We had to reimagine how floats, performances, and creativity would be experienced differently. And we had to say, well, we can't do floats. How do we move towards stages, standalone sculptures, and an immersive COVID-safe walkthrough environment? These are all also very new areas for us. And then to take what is a moving, very much dance and music performance genre into dramatic, static pieces with, you know, performance groups that are not professionals. They're not actors and actresses and professional dancers. And then a very exciting thing occurred for us. We met with our community group leaders and any other interested parties every month anyway during the year to discuss logistics and themes and unpacking of themes and so on. And we decided to turn these into our live or our online events. So we took the sub-themes from the carnival, which are generally probably a little bit elusive for the spectator, but which the groups work with to develop their performances and their music, and for us in the job creation to develop costumes and floats. And we went into intensive workshops into each of these sub-themes, and we turned them into workshop shows, participation, breakaway groups, and we could really, we actually started off online. We managed to have 2 in person. The background picture shows you how in our workshop we were actually able to, with 2 meters distances, have an in-person one. And, you know, you'd get up and dance on or around your chair, or turn your chair inward and become part of a breakaway group. Otherwise, this was all done on Zoom with great success. They were very fulfilling. And we ran those from September 2020 up until April 2021. The other important part of keeping the carnival alive, not necessarily for the audiences, but keeping the whole network going, was constant focus group sessions to check in with our group leaders, with the performers, the artists, artisans, freelance crew, you know, really speak in intimate small groups of up to 10 people about how they were dealing with COVID and what were the crisis things going on in their community. So we actually did spend a bit of money on hunger relief, and but a lot of time just being in support. And then, you know, we had developed a new event format, and we were ready to deliver that then in March 2021, and a second wave hit. So another event cancellation. And actually that was, I think, much harder for us to deal with, because we had done so many pivots, and we were so certain that we had these very small COVID safe events on the table, which I'll tell you about. And now that was also cancelled, and we were nearing the end of our financial year. And so how would we deliver to our sponsors with another event cancellation? So we shifted our focus again into keeping people active in training, various trainings, mostly oriented to digital tools, and a large number of people were trained. They were all people within our network, whether they were staff or crew or people who might have worked building art, or community members or performers. So those are the people that were invited to take part in the training. We usually create far more jobs, but we continued to do whatever we could. People had lost jobs, and to keep as many people as possible employed in our workshop. This was an incredible experience. I think, you know, we were lucky we have a very big workshop. We could have small groups of people working at distance, being trained and having intensive training, because when you're building towards an event, you don't have that opportunity. And as you can see from the quote here, I think it was a very fulfilling experience for the trainees as well. So super key for us in keeping the carnival alive has been the need for high levels of communication to keep people informed and to get their feedback and to keep agile in moving forward. Since we couldn't have any events, and all of our participants, that's their focal point, their rehearsals, their showcasing, getting the love from all the spectators, we decided we have to find a way to give them exposure. And we've been working on filming. So the difficulty is to get people into safe spaces so that they can actually perform even in tiny groups, because generally you're looking at a group, anything from 30 people to 150 people as a sort of a cohesive group that performs in a carnival. And so we had to support them in finding ways to safely rehearse and perform and make a video. And we've got a very nice campaign that's kicking off from the 1st of June to mid-August to showcase those community performance videos. So next stop for us is to take the event formats that we've developed, the COVID-safe event formats, and deliver it to the public. This new event format for us is 5 separate hubs with online viewing, plus partnership with businesses in the city. The 3 components of it are that we have 5 access-controlled COVID-safe hubs, is what we're calling them, and the public has to move around. It takes about 10 minutes to walk from one hub to the other, but it creates enough space. And then you have to have a ticket, and the carnival previously was free. And you have to have a ticket so that there's track and trace for COVID, and screening as you come in. And there'll be, you know, if it's 300 or 500 people allowed, they come in for a show, there's spacing within the outdoor environment. And then people leave, and that show is repeated 5 times during the day in the different areas. And there's deep cleaning between each show. The other aspect is to partner with the businesses in those areas, so that you know, Cape Town, it's a tourist economy, to get people coming and getting out, and while they're coming to carnival shows, to also support the restaurants and bars and galleries and whatever else is in the area, and to get them visiting those as well. And then the third part, is the streaming, the city. There's still quite a bit of public sentiment against getting out, and obviously anxiety. We don't know how well the vaccine rollout will have gone by the time we are able to host another event. So we will have live streaming for those that want to be at home. And in closing, we were asked by the organizers of this workshop to just give a little bit of our 3 top advice pointers. Do not be resistant to change, be open to new ways of doing things, convert your existing network into your audience initially, because it builds outwards from there, and embrace the digital evolution. For us, the digital evolution wasn't about having an online show. It was about learning to use all the different digital tools that are available to keep carnival activity going. So it was a slightly different use of that mechanism for us. And in the end, for us, it was actually a great year. It was, we learned to adapt and to work very well as a team. Lots of cultural understanding through all the workshops, building strong networks, lots of training, job creation, and skills transfer. So thank you for letting us share that with you.
Great, thank you so much, Jay. That was really an amazing journey that you've taken, as various people were commenting in the chat, and there are also some nice questions coming up. With your indulgence, I'd just like to share with you a few points of interest from Buyele Kaya. So unfortunately, Osa Mazwai, who's one of the festival organizers, was not able to join us today, but he did send us some of his kind of top advice. And since his adaptation is a very sort of quite a different one. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to share the screen and ending up with multiple things going on. I thought it would be an interesting example just to add to the collection. So with your indulgence, if I could perhaps just have 5 minutes or so to chat about Buyele Kaya. All right. Okay, so Buyele Kaya is describe themselves as a Pan-African music festival. They started in 2009 and they happen each year in December in the Eastern Cape. So Buyele Kaya meaning coming home. And they're positioned to have an audience from all over the country who are returning to the Eastern Cape family homes, usually around Christmas time. The festival itself is a relatively short event. So like the carnival, there's a long build-up and then there's an event over about 24 hours. And it usually happens in Buffalo City in the stadium. It attracts audiences of about 25,000 people. And this allows the audiences to get like really a good mix of all kinds of African music professionals. So Eastern Cape artists, newer artists, as well as more well-known kind of national and sometimes even international African artists. Since 2016, they've also started a fashion development design project, especially for young up-and-coming Eastern Cape designers. So their adaptation was to TV broadcast. And the thinking behind this was that it wasn't feasible for them to have a socially distanced event. So they couldn't, even though at that stage you were allowed to have events with social distancing, they didn't see that that would work for them at all financially or just in terms of the vibe of the festival. And they also felt that their audience was not likely to engage online. Which is why they opted for the TV broadcast. They were actually also thinking about TV broadcasting, particularly around the fashion design program. And so they had already established some contacts and some networks. So in the end, the festival was broadcast twice on DSTV on the 26th of December and then also on the 31st of December. They kept the Eastern Cape focused through including Eastern Cape presenters and personalities and some artists, but not as many as usual, and the use of visual material, which they got from Eastern Cape tourism to try and still keep the location. I think that's one of the challenges for a lot of festivals that have moved online. So they were not able to film the festival, which was pre-recorded and before the broadcast. It wasn't a live broadcast, but they weren't able to film it in the Eastern Cape because of the lack of really high-powered filming studios. So talking to Osa, one of the interesting stories was, well, we do have film studios in the Eastern Cape, but they're not completely soundproof. So if you've booked a very expensive, high-powered artist and there's a thunderstorm, you have to stop recording, whereas that's not the case with film studios in Johannesburg, which is where they originally filmed it. So the filming didn't happen in the Eastern Cape. They're also not able to broadcast on SABC, which would have been their first choice. There were just all kinds of financial constraints there, which were problematic. So in the end, they moved to DSTV channels. And all of this negotiation took quite a lot of time. So although they'd started planning well in advance for the TV broadcast, they only had 4 days in which to advertise which channels it was going to be on and when it was going to happen. It was still a considerable success. So they were able to give a platform to artists, artistic producers at a time when there wasn't much other work happening in South Africa. And it was watched by just over 400,000 people. So that was, they think, an important proof of concept. So this is the information that Osa sent to me today. Firstly, to note that Buyele Kaya looks poised to return to TV again this year. So they think that that's a really good platform for them. And the planning has gone in that direction because we just don't know what's going to happen next with the pandemic. And then here are his 3 insights. Always have achievable and realistic planning, right? So admit what is achievable or not as early as you can. And I know that lots of the adaptation stories that we heard were kind of a very quick adaptation, but as much time as possible really, really helps you. What enabled their shift to TV was firstly that it was already part of their agenda. So it was something that they'd been thinking about already, although not in this format. And because they accepted by the middle of the year that things were not going to happen in the normal way in December. Protect the resilience and relevance of your brand always, right? So one of the things that motivated their shift was continuity, I think, more than anything. So remaining important in the public mind, and also sort of a loyalty aspect to it. So remaining loyal to fans who wanted something like that when they were feeling perhaps a bit down and gloomy, and also to artistic producers. And for them, this was really a big win in a way, because they went from audiences of 25,000 to audiences of 400,000. But that did not translate into more income, right? So budget wisely and retain capital for rainy days, which for them, budget-wise, this definitely was. So they were open about admitting that the festival had to put in quite a lot of their own investment money in order to make it work. Okay, so that's a very quick input from Buyele Kaya. If you do have any questions about the adaptation, I would be very happy to answer those that I can, based on the interviews that we've had and the research we've done with them already. But I'll also be happy to pass them on to to Osa and his team if you have anything you would like to put in. Okay. Right, so that brings us to the end of our presentations, and we now have some time for questions to Jay and your team, and to Jana and your team. I know that there are members of your team in the audience who might not be necessarily the presenting, and thank you very much to some of them who've already started answering the questions. So. How about if we take a first round of questions to Jana and the State Oosterfees, and maybe is it Karina would like to join in or help you to answer some of those questions, yeah? And if there's anybody else, sorry, I can't see everybody on my one screen, but if there's anyone else from State Oosterfees who would like to maybe switch on their camera and help us to answer the questions, please go ahead and do that. Okay, so the first question that we had in the chat was just to talk a little bit more, Jana, about the combination of the live and the big screen, right? So what was happening there was the screen projecting what was happening on the stage, or were they two sort of slightly different things? So that was one question, and how the levels worked with, you know, the cars, the stage, and the screen. So that was the first question in the chat. The second one was around the choir. So Kutlwano, I think you were asking about how did you handle the choir? And then I think maybe that's where Karina would like to come in. And then Tonderai asks, are you keeping any of this for the future? So maybe we could start with those three questions. And then if there are others who would like to add questions at the end, please feel free to do that. Or you can put your hand up if you want to just talk. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a little smiley face reaction button. And one of the options is raise hand, like I'm doing now. So you can see I've got my hand up. So if you'd just like to ask a question, go ahead. Jana, over to you.
So the setup was the cars were parked, and we had quite a joke about that because we used to double bookings on theatre seats, not in getting cars into parking lots. But the Atlantic team were amazing to get the smaller cars more to the front, the bigger cars to the back, so that everyone can see. And then we built a stage. The screen is on, and it's actually a permanent structure now at Atlantic Studios. And then we put up a temporary stage underneath the screen. So you can see the actors and then the projection on the screen, and you will tune your car radio into a set frequency, and then you will hear the volume. So that was the setup of it, to have the cars with the stage, and the projection is just above the stage. So if that answered that question. In terms of the rehearsal, I think we need to give Karina the biggest applause ever. She rehearsed with that choir over Zoom. She had those kids there in their mosque. I think, Karina, you need to step in here, but what she did, she's our biggest trooper of them all, is to get a children's choir to rehearse and perform in a pandemic is not a joke. So Karina, I hand over to you.
Hello, thank you. It was quite a big effort, but a wonderful opportunity, because it was the first performance for the year for the choir. So they loved it, and it was a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful stage, and how St. Oosterfees handled the whole theatre thing outside. It was really wonderful. So the children could sing because they were allowed at that stage, as currently, to perform without a mask. But when we had to do all the COVID sanitizing and all the other procedures we have to do, and off stage they will they all have to keep their distances and wear masks. So they are all used to that in school. So that was not really a problem for us.
Great, thank you, Karina. And Jana, your last question was, what are you keeping from your experiences going into the future?
It is quite interesting because everyone was so nostalgic about the drive-in that we decided we have to keep on with that format. So even this year we did a production at Atlantic with the drive-in because it's just something different and special. Mm. And it is something that keeps you safe because you are in the safety of your own vehicle, which make it awesome. So it is quite an expensive exercise, but then we also have quite an expensive exercise with theatres with limited capacity. But we are truly, truly grateful for sponsors and for our partners, our artists, our suppliers, how everyone just realized this is what we're dealing with and we all need to make cuts and adjustments just to do something. So yeah, big applause for all, I think.
Thank you. Kutlwano, I saw you had your hand up and then it disappeared. Do you have a follow-up question perhaps you would like to ask? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Prof. I wanted to ask to Karina. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Tygerberg is more or less a community choir and involving different number of communities from different schools. I wanted to ask particularly, how you handled rehearsals, taking into consideration that obviously the kids were from different background, and could they all get in touch with you on Zoom, and how you handled going about with that?
Okay, we all worked from my home. So we worked, there's the voice parts we worked from home and Zoom, where there are limitations for only one singer, but we did it throughout lockdown, so we could handle that. And then we got together about a week before the time, and we worked outside. I am a teacher, and therefore my school allowed me, because we could not get a venue to practice. So my school allowed me to work on the premises of the school, doing all the COVID regulations. And the children were some in my school also. So therefore I could use the school. And I'm thankful for that, because otherwise the choirs have very difficult times in finding places to practice. So, but actually the real practice were individually with Zoom and with voice notes.
Thank you.
Wow, thanks for that. Yeah. We've got a couple more questions, so I wonder if I could just take those together and then hand them over to Jana, and then we'll move on to talking about the Cape Town Carnival, because I don't want us to miss out on those. So first Monica, and then Devin, and then I think there was somebody else whose hand was up, which seems to have gone now. But okay, let's start with Monica and then Devin. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and such inspiring, complex, difficult stories from everybody. But I think one of the big questions that all of us are facing as festivals is the revenue question, and we've extended ourselves to really retain sponsors, and we've been able to do that. But the revenue question is still there. How is St. Eustachius kind of engaging with that as you begin to think about what 2021 and beyond holds?
Thank you. Devin, do you want to go ahead and ask your question now, and then we'll deal with them both together?
Hey there. Sure, thanks. I just wanted to know, in terms of the number of festivals that have been that were calculated to take place within the Western Cape, specifically the music festivals. Personally, I just know there were a lot of underground or like unofficial festivals that took place. They were actually fondly termed as the plague raves, and because of being like spread events. And I wondered if those had been like noted or accounted for, if they had been seen within the tallies that had come up.
Thank you. Thanks, Devin. That might be more a question for the Future Festivals team. But maybe, Jana, if you would maybe like to talk to the question about sponsors, and then I'd like to hand over to the Cape Town Carnival team. So if there's any last thoughts you'd like to leave with us as well, please go ahead.
I think, Jen, when all the artists and the producers and the suppliers had a session with you, it also became very clear to your team that this was a group effort, and it's the only reason we are able to do what we do. Obviously, we did smaller productions to lower costs, but at the end of the day, everyone had to give up something in the process, whether it is artistically or financially. Everyone sort of realized this is where we're at, and if we want to do something, we need to. If it's sustainable, that's a different question. We had a big focus. Let's just get through this 2 years. But yeah, it is quite interesting to see how we can make get the revenue back on track, because that is a realistic issue if you can only have 50% capacity. But yeah, it is all due to a very great team that were all able to compromise to put the things on.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that with us, and thank you to Karina as well. Jay, perhaps we can talk a little bit about a bit more about the Cape Town Carnival. And I see Franco is with us as well. Hi, Franco, nice to see you there. So the question I've got for you just from the chat is from Tandaraya. Perhaps you would like to actually add to that. But it's basically about when you talk about the Cape Town Carnival as being an immersive experience, what does that mean, and how are you keeping some of that, or trying to keep some of that? So do you want to just talk a bit more about what you meant there? And then if anybody else has another question, follow-up question for Cape Town Carnival, please go ahead.
Thanks,
Jay,
Jen.
do you want to start with that one? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think over the years of developing the Cape Town Carnival, carnivals in other countries are not as regulated, and the city of Cape Town has a fence between the performers and the floats and the spectators. So right from the early days, we had to think, how do we involve spectators more in an immersive experience? Because carnival isn't something you traditionally watch, it's something you participate in. So things like making sure your outside the corridor environment is also carnival-like, that there's the type of food or the type of visuals and the atmosphere and the music. And it's tricky because it's super expensive. But obviously we had made headway with some of that. And just generally 50,000 people does make your experience richer. I don't know if it's immersive, but it's richer. And now you're going into access control, distanced, fear-based kind of environments. And of course, what we've spent our money on is floats, which are, all on one thing and on wheels. So it's about dismantling all of that artwork and trying to create spectacular pieces or spectacular costumes. The performances, there's no problem. They are absolutely vibrant, wonderful performances from the participating groups. But it's to have a physical environment in which you're walking through art. There's music. Again, there won't be any vendors. You have to keep your mask on. So it's really about changing it into a sort of walk through art environment. And that's how we want to make it immersive, or how to continue to make it immersive. And that's going to be tricky because you need money to do beautiful art. And yeah, we'll just see how that goes this year. There was also a question from Monica that you didn't pick up on, which I thought was a nice question about what is the learning. And I think for us it was what we do has value. Everything we were doing has value, and we should continue doing that, just in a different way. So that was our biggest learning.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Franco, I just want to bring you in here because when we had our first chat, you were talking about the way that you work to keep people interested and engaged, and also how you dealt with some of the great sadness when it became clear that the event wasn't going to happen last year. Despite all the work that you've done. Would you like to talk about those kind of things from the production side and your experiences a bit?
For sure, Jen, it would be a pleasure. Yes, just to blend it in what Jay was saying is that the thing that we realized as a team is that what we're doing has value. And when all these things happened, and it was the first wave lockdown, second wave lockdown, and things that we were busy with, they had to stop, people had to stop working, there was no more income, and we created these things where we interacted with not only crew, but participants, group leaders, where we had these focus sessions, and we interacted with our people. And well, most of them, they said what Carnival meant to them, and how Carnival helped them, and how Carnival helps the communities. And me personally, being involved in facilitating the training that happened here at the workshop, I could also see how people grew and how people came and flowered into, people that is usually shy, come from communities that where stimulating creativity is not possible, it's not present. And in this space that we created here in Carnival, that's just the things that I personally firsthand noticed. What Carnival did for people, how Carnival helped people, and even the resilience that was shown by the team, by the whole Carnival family. We found out that we're not just our staff and crew and members at this Carnival family, but also the participants and all the other guys that helped to create this one-day event, that they are also part of this thing. And everybody just pulled together, and the resilience was, once again, it was shown. Like Jay said in the beginning, our initial theme was the incredible journey, and it was just, well, I won't call it a coincidence, it was just so, well, cosmically aligned that we had to go through this thing as well. And we showed the resilience again of the people, that everything that was thrown our way, we just alchemized and converted that energy into something good. So yeah.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a very, the incredible journey turned out to be more incredible than we thought it would be, and harder in some ways. Yeah. Thank you very much. Mboneni says, I'm missing 2 questions down the bottom here. I can see one to Buyele Kaya asking about whether they're planning to take this forward in the future or have some kind of hybrid event. I will definitely ask that question, but from what Ursa sent this morning, it looks like it's going to be a TV thing this year again, not hybrid, but I could be wrong about that. And they're very aware, as I think a lot of festivals are, that the location aspect is being a bit lost, right? So Jay, with the Cape Town Carnival and Franco, you're still very linked to your location, and your plans are to have something, actually in the city. But for festivals that have moved online completely, it's maybe becoming a little bit harder to make those locational links. I think that's something that Buyele Kaya is thinking about quite hard, is how they continue to be rooted in the Eastern Cape. So it's quite a sort of fraught thing, but I can't really answer right at this moment. Quite a few people are asking if they can have access to the recording or to the slides that are in the chat. We've asked you please to leave your contact details if you're interested. We'll check with our presenters what we could share with you, and we'll be happy to contact you afterwards. Just in closing,
sorry,
I would like. Yes,
sorry.
yes. Mboneni, over to you.
The question that Monica had asked was answered by Jay. If it is, maybe I missed it. I'm not sure. There was also a question from Ufuno, who happens to share my surname, about was the question, if one music video sponsors are the institutions that you know where we can send proposals to. It's just those two. I don't know whether they've been dealt with. I just thought maybe before we close, if there's anybody that can answer. I'm not sure whether Jay had answered the question from Monica as well.
Yes, that's a good point, actually. So Jay, would you like to also talk about or talk to Monica's question relating to sponsors in particular? And then if anybody can answer Lufuno's question about where would you look for sponsorship for things like music videos, that would be really helpful as well.
Thanks, Jen. With regard to sponsorship, unfortunately, it remains to be seen for us. Last year, we managed to persuade some of our sponsors that the shift away from performing in a live event to the training and job creation and the workshops were sufficient for them to sponsor us. Not all of our sponsors did, but certainly enough to keep us going. And we are at the beginning of our next cycle. And I think the issues aren't only about what we're doing, it's about what money is now available, because COVID has affected our economy. So you know, about half of our sponsorship comes from different government agencies. City of Cape Town doesn't sponsor if there isn't an actual event. So it doesn't matter what we do if there isn't an actual event. If there's a further lockdown, National Arts and Culture, I don't know what their financial situation is. And corporates are saying that their business is doing poorly. So we are holding thumbs, really. I don't think there are any sustainable solutions that are readily available.
Thank you. Thanks, Jay. That's probably a good sort of insightful note to end off on. Just to return to a question to our team, which I see Fiona has partly responded to already, about did we pick up on any of these sort of underground festivals and raves that were happening? Fee, do you want to just share what you've been saying in the chat so far?
Yeah. So sitting in Mafeking and only being able to search online, I know I've missed some of the festivals that have been happening. So if there are festivals in general, just from anybody in the audience that you want to check if we know about them, please do get in touch with us and I'll be able to say, I have checked my database. I was very pleased to say I do have a number of the festivals on there already that people were indicating in the chat. So feeling quite good about that. In terms of some of the plague raves, I think there were some that were happening around the Cape Town docks, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So I did capture some of them, but if they weren't kind of put up on social media or had some form of online activity, then I would have missed them. So it would be really nice to chat a bit more about that and find out about the kind of underground scene and a bit of COVID rebellion. So yeah, let's get in touch about that.
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Devon. Yeah, we did. I mean, as Fiona says, some of them were not strictly COVID compliant at all. And so obviously then we didn't manage to pick those up. Okay, so in closing, I would just like to thank everybody massively from my side. And I'll now hand over to my colleague, Mr. Mboneni Malaudzi. Mboneni, over to you.
Thanks, Prof. I don't know whether anybody can deal with it. Maybe they can respond on the chat as well. The one about if there was a particular insight on the film festivals. Perhaps somebody can just type to respond to Jason. But really just thanks for all the insights, and we'll do our best to share what we can share, and we'll definitely share the recording. As Prof has indicated, we'll look at what presentations there are, and that can be shared, and we'll share it with people that have either indicated by giving us an email here or by sending the email to Renee. We'll be able to share. But many thanks to all the people that have come through this morning. I mean, we've run over just by about 9 minutes. And yeah, if there are any other questions, I think people can send to us here on the chat group or on the emails that invited them, or to Renee's email address.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And a special thank you to our presenters, Jay and Jana. We really appreciate the time that you took to put the slides together, and of course our ongoing research association. And thank you very much also to Roberta and to Jonathan joining us from the UK. And it was lovely to meet you all. And as we say, please do keep in touch. We'd be very happy to share any of the information that you might be interested in. So thank you very much, everybody. That brings us to the end.
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.